Hello. I'm going to go over Lab 7 quickly today. Let me switch over so you can see it. Okay, so here's the lab. It's about finding groups. So the big idea is that often, as we've talked about, human networks are what I call groupy, that there are natural groups, and some of the theories we've talked about lead to groups. So if you think about triadic closure, right, it leads groups to be, if strong edges become closed, triangles become closed, then pretty soon lots of people will be connected to each other in a group and with only weak ties between them. Foci of activity says almost like sort of the opposite, that our edges come from often groups that we belong to, that we will go to high school or be part of classes, and that these groups lead to edges to exist. So if you think about your network, you can probably think about different groups, friendship groups that you are a part of that come from different locations or that are in groups with each other, right? So I give the example of high school friends, Purdue friends, soccer friends, whatever. And so we can use network structure to identify people who are likely to be in the same group. So we're going to use the UK faculty friendship data. So this is part of the iGraph data. So this is how you load it. You can just run this, and this plots this first plot. So this is what it looks like initially. You can see one of the I guess strange things about this data, or different from some of the other data, is that it is directed. So I don't show the direction in this graph, but you can see, for example, this node and this node are, can I zoom in even a little bit more? This node and this node are touching, have two edges between them, sorry. So that's because the edges go both directions. So there's actually a few network tools we're going to be using that assume that it is undirected. So we're going to change that in just a second. But you can look, if you just type, now we've loaded it. So let's really quick look at the code here. So we've loaded it. It's called UK faculty. We load it here and save it as UK. And then this plots it. So UK is the variable name that we've given it. So we often have used G. It doesn't matter what you use. We're calling this one UK. And so here's, if we just type UK, you can also type it here if you want to see it. It'll be the exact same thing. It'll show the nodes. I think it always shows the nodes first, and any variables, any attributes associated with the nodes. So there's an attribute called group. In this case, it's UK faculty, and they're part of different, I don't remember if it's different departments or different units in a department, something like that. And so there are literal groups that they belong to. So that's part of what's going on here. And then for our edges, we have from, to, and wait. So that is it says the department. Okay, so I must have looked it up at some point. So that's the department is the group node. And so we're going to change this to only mutual edges that are undirected. That's what this does. So as undirected changes it to undirected edges only. And so we can see what's going on. I actually I said mutual edges. I'm not positive that's true. So by mutual edges, what I mean is, and here's the reason I'm thinking that it would only be edges where both edges exist. So this person says they are friends with this person. I think it's a friendship network. Yeah, friendship network. And this person says they're friends with this person. So the friendship goes both directions. And it would only keep those edges and turn into a single edge. But I'm realizing the reason I don't think that it's doing that is because this person looks like they only have one edge to anyone, right? In both cases, they only have one edge. And down here, they still have both of those edges. So I'm thinking that it's actually either way, as long as there's one edge going either direction, it's keeping it, which is fine. It's just something to know. Something that's incorrect in the way that I said it. I think there's an attribute or a parameter you can put in here that will say which edges to keep. But off the top of my head, I don't know how it's done. It's not that important. In this case, I just wanted to clarify that because I think it's wrong. I'll try and fix it in here as well, and confirm after I make this video. So the first exercise is to color the nodes by the group so that you can see kind of the quote-unquote true groups, so the departments that people are in. So you're exercise, your goal, is to color the nodes based on the group node attribute. So again, you'll have to use an aesthetic mapping like we've done before, and you may want to change, it'll look better if you change the groups to factors. If you remember a factor, so the groups are numbers now, and R by default, we'll see those as numbers that can be like continuous. Like so 1 is, or 2 is twice as much as 1, and 3 is 3 times as much as 1. And when it comes to groups, that doesn't really make sense. And so a factor is saying that these are actually categories and not numbers. So you'll have to use as factor, and again, look back at previous labs to remember how to do that. So how can we identify groups and networks? The simplest is components. So this is who is connected at all to anyone. So if you will see in just a second, I give an example because I think it's really an interesting kind of quirk of how things work. Is that there's almost always a single quote unquote giant component where everyone is connected to almost everyone. Almost everyone is connected to almost everyone else, which seems strange. Like we might think that like the reason, well, that the intuition is that like it's so easy for there to be connections between, when all there has to be is one connection between any two people in either of these groups, then it's very easy for that to occur. So, right, so as the example I give here, let's say you had 50 people, 25 in one group, 25 in another group. If any of the 25 people in one component adds an edge to any of the 25 people in the other one, then they are now one component, right? And so this makes it very easy, right? If how many different options? 25 times 25 different possibilities of edges that could exist. And so if any of them occur, then now it's a component. So unless there's something separating the groups, like some sort of friendship across groups is almost certain to occur. So if we look, here's an example. You don't have to understand this code. It's just showing this is the probability of an edge existing. So 2%, 5%, 8%, and 10%. It's just doing random graphs with 2% of the edges existing, etc. So you can see with 2%, obviously, there's a lot of components because hardly anyone's connected to hardly anyone else. And yours will actually look different than this if you run this code because it's random. So in some cases, at 5%, you will see one giant component. So this is a giant component. You may likely see kind of one big component or maybe another group. At 8%, almost always there will be a giant component. And at 10%, it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be a giant component, maybe one or two isolates. But even just 10%, right? This is still not very many people connected. Everyone is part of one group. So it's not very helpful, in other words, for identifying groups, even though it seems intuitive. The next simplest idea is the clique or a clique. This identifies groups where everyone's connected to everyone else. So this largest cliques function will find all of the largest ones. So there are, I think, how many is it? 13 different cliques of size 9. And you'll see if you look at them, there's a lot of overlap. So this is 21, 29, 31, 15, 79, 2. And then here's where there's a little bit different. So 37 is connected to all of these. And 46 is connected to all of these, but apparently 37 and 46 are not connected to each other. So they're each part of two separate cliques. And this is sort of pretty common. So let's look, this shows coloring them. So if you want to understand this code, first we find the first one. So this one is saying, give me the first click from this largest cliques of UK and save it as the variable click nodes. And then we're going to figure out which nodes those are. So we give an index for the nodes. So they're numbered from 1 to the number of rows number of nodes that there are. That's this in row of n. And then we create a new variable called inClick, which says if this number that we just created is in the click nodes, then this should be true. If it's not in it, then it'll be false. So we'll now have this this new thing that is, in fact, let me show you. Let's just show what that looks like really quick. For those interested in how this works, so I can comment out this, and then when I run this, it'll just run the first part. So, oops, yeah, okay, we do want to do that. UK, okay. Let's look at it. So now we've run the first half. It ran this part of the code. I'll fix it in a second. So now we have this in-click marker or column in the nodes that's false or true. So number 5 is in the first click, but none of the others from 1 to 6 are in the first click. And so every node gets a true or a false for whether they're in this list of click nodes. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Then we're going to graph it. And this part should all look familiar. The one key thing is we're coloring the nodes. So we got an aesthetic mapping color to this variable in click. And then this last part just gives a title. So the name of it is in largest click. So that's where this title comes from. And so you can see this colors them based on whether they're in the largest click. And it's pretty clear right away that there is why clicks don't work very well. Because this, if we were going to draw a circle around a group that includes, these nodes here, these 3 nodes, we would not draw it like in this weird way that like goes like this around these ones and around those ones, right? This is clearly more of a group. Something like that. And so things, clicks often miss many of the members of a group. And so there's some tweaks like in clicks where everyone has to be, if you're within at least 2 steps of each other, then you're a group, or K clicks. So an in click of 2, right? That'd be 2 steps of each other. K plexes where everyone has to be connected to all but K other members of the group. So like a 0 plex is a click. A 1 plex is you can be connected to everyone except for one other person, etc. So some of these work pretty well. They don't work quite as well as some of the other community detection algorithms, which are more complicated but work a little bit better. So that's what I'm going to focus on. It's also, again, in part because they don't work that well, iGraph does not, at least last time I checked, they do not have implementations. So so community detection, there's a couple, and it's not super important that you understand this, but maybe to understand the intuition behind what a group is and how we can think about, how to identify groups in networks. One is based on the idea of modularity, and this is sort of an ideal for all groups, is that there are a lot of edges in between, so you maximize the number of edges within a group, and you minimize the number of edges between groups. So that's the idea. And then the second approach, which sort of gets to the same place, so algorithms based on modularity try to literally count that and like adjust things until they can maximize the kind of some sort of score that maximizes edges within and minimizes edges between. And then a random walk gets you to a similar place, but it does it by just starting at a random node and then choosing an edge randomly and going to that node, choosing an edge from there randomly and going to that node, etc. And it sort of tracks where it's likely, if I start from this node, where am I likely to end up? And overall, I end up in these areas, and so they're part of a group. I end up at these nodes most of the time, so they're part of a group. That's the idea. So this first one, fast greedy, is a modularity type approach. Again, to look at the code, we start with UK, we activate the nodes, we create a new variable called community. We're going to make it a factor because we think of groups, right, as categories. They're not really numbers. So that's what this as factor is. And so group fast greedy is the algorithm. So we're going to apply the group fast greedy algorithm, which will give a number to each node. We're going to change that, make sure that it's a factor, and we'll save it as community. So then we'll send it to ggraph, add edges, and then map the color to the community that we just created, right? So the color of the nodes is going to change. Color of the nodes is going to change based on this community variable. And then this just changes, this viridis makes it these pretty colors, and gives it a title. So that's what's going on here. If you will compare this to the graph that you make of the department numbers, or the departments, you will see that there's a lot of similarities, that this does a pretty darn good job of identifying the groups. I think that there may be 4 departments and this shows 5, but you can see it's pretty good. Or maybe vice versa, like this one only has 4 and there's 5, I don't remember which it is. But this is similar to random walks. This is called, it's a label propagation, so this is called group Louvain, or Louvain, I don't know how it's pronounced. And the code is very similar, right? So we just change the algorithm out. That's really all that changes here. We're still calling it community. We're still coloring by community. And then we change the title here. So changing those 2 things will give you a new way of doing it. And you can see it's really quite similar. Which colors are which are changed. And it sort of grouped these as one group. Right? These are all purple. but that's pretty much the only difference. There are a few, if you look at the nodes, like this one became purple or became yellow over here, it connected it to this, but overall it's quite similar. And to be honest, for a lot of networks, different modern community detection approaches give fairly similar results. So your exercise, if you want, there's a few things you could do. You could look at different, so look on tidygraph documentation, like maybe look up the grouping, and you could try some different ones and see how they look. Another thing you can do is change the layout. So we just use the default, which is stress. And so all of these, I think, use the stress layout. Other layouts, you should see, see how they look, because that layout can help see the group as well. I mean, you can tell the stress layout does a pretty good job, matches up pretty well with the community detection algorithms. Like the things that are the same color are close together in general, and things that are different colors are further apart, which is what we want. So so check a few on this link and look up and try to change them. So that you can, if you remember, the way that you do that is in, this one is explicitly stress. So where this says stress, you might have KK or FR or whatever. It's a little bit tricky from the page to see what you're supposed to do, but you basically, whatever the name of it is, you can call it that. So if it's called, so for example, I think this is, you can see here, it says layout with KK. The layout underscore width, you can ignore and just put the KK in quotes there. Okay, so that's that. So another thing you might do is I used colors to identify different groups. There's other options. Think of a different way you could visualize groups, either draw a picture or actually code it in ggraph. If it's something that's easy in ggraph, you might be able to just change that color into a different aesthetic. And then finally, the last challenge is to go back to your visualization challenge project and add or change it to have a visualization of group structure. So as a note, you'll need to load in the data in this file, right? So you'll have to do that, like nodes, edges, graph from data frame stuff here. And then finally, I just wanted to show you coreness as well. It's semi-related. So these are k-core coreness numbers. So the idea of coreness is to identify core members and peripheral members in a group. And so coreness is basically like what size of group are you in where everyone else is connected to at least that many people. So, what's the biggest group? What's the group you're in where the highest number of people are connected to each other? Yeah, something like that. So 10 is the highest here. So that means this person belongs to a group. We could draw a circle around probably these people right here where all of them are connected to at least 10 other people in the group. That's the idea. It's cool, but it's really for identifying core people rather than groups more broadly. Okay, that's it. Hopefully that's helpful, and good luck.